Hello, amazing entrepreneur. It's Tash Corbin here, and welcome to another episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. This is episode number 173, which means you can find all the relevant links and show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/173. In today's episode, we're talking about how to increase the value proposition of your group program. So that might be an online course, a membership, a mastermind, or some kind of group offering that you have. Now, I talk about value proposition a lot, but most of the time we talk about value proposition through the lens of one-to-one offers or your business services overall. So today I wanted to make sure that we focus down on specifically the value proposition of a group program, because there are some nuances for group programs in particular. Let's dive on in. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. If you've followed me and listened to this podcast for a while, you probably already have a good understanding of what value proposition is. But if you want a little refresh, value proposition is the gap between where someone is before working with you and where they are after working with you. And it is the value of that gap in the eyes of the buyer. Now, this is really important, and it's part of the nuance of value proposition that not a lot of people talk about, because you could perceive the value of that gap to be quite high. Let's say you help people sleep more effectively and get a good night's sleep, and you know how valuable that is. You know it contributes to health and well-being, it contributes to brain capacity, it contributes to a bunch of different things. And so you see the value, like what value do you put on a good night's sleep as a sleep specialist? Well, you're going to put a lot of value on that. Yeah. But your ideal clients or your niche or people in your audience may not ascribe the same value. For them, it would be nice to have a longer night's sleep or a better night's sleep, but they're surviving on 5 hours a night right now, and it's pretty rushed, but they're doing okay, so it's not that big a deal to them. See how that perception of the value is very different between those two people. It's the same reason why I don't recommend that you go into any groups or ask anyone, what would you pay for XYZ? I see this all the time. I'm in a lot of artist groups and creative groups, and people were saying, how much would you pay for this piece of art? Or how much would you pay for a 4-week group program that helped you to set up your first Facebook ad? Well, if I'm not in the market to run Facebook ads, I won't pay a lot for it. But if that's exactly the thing I'm focused on right now, I'll likely pay more. If I see Facebook ads as the key to me having my first ever 6-figure launch, I would say I value it at 6 figures, right? Because it's the gap. That's the gap, is if I run good Facebook ads, I'm going to have a 6-figure launch. If I don't, I'm not. So there's significant value in that. Same as you see people ask, oh, how much would you pay for this piece of art? Someone says $50, someone says $3,000, because it's through the eyes of the beholder, yeah? So when it comes to a group program in particular, value proposition is critical. Being able to effectively articulate what is the gap between before doing your course and after, and why is that valuable to your ideal client, is critical in getting those people to buy the course. It's not enough to say, oh, just trust me. It will help you. It'll be great for you. It's amazing. It's so valuable, right? That doesn't actually increase the value proposition in the eyes of your clients. So we want to make sure that we're really good at articulating value proposition. Now, 2 big ones that I want to just completely blow out of the water straight away. Sometimes when someone wants to make something look more valuable, they put more stuff in it. But you don't actually increase the value proposition by adding more stuff. If we take the definition of value proposition at its face value, right, the gap between where I am before and where I am after, and how valuable that gap is for me, that gap doesn't change because you added a bonus template. That gap doesn't change because you've got 6 expert interviews in the bonus section. That gap doesn't change because it's 9 sessions instead of 4 sessions. Yes, of course, the gap the what you could achieve in that time will change, but the gap doesn't change. You have to articulate the change in gap. You have to change, well, the promise is different then. Does that make sense? So we don't increase the value of a program by adding bonus modules. And if you think about your own experiences buying things, your own experiences where stuff is chucked in that you don't necessarily need, does that actually add to the value? So when it comes to online courses, group programs, memberships, those sorts of things, this is particularly important because so many people get sucked into offering short-term bonuses or offering extra bonuses or this bonus and that bonus because we think it's going to increase the perceived value. But in most cases, more things equals more work. If the promise and the gap doesn't change, so let's say the 4-week course on setting up great Facebook ads, let's say it becomes a 6-week course, but the promise is the same. We're going to set up great Facebook ads. The value hasn't increased. The number of weeks has increased. The workload has increased, but the value hasn't necessarily increased. If by adding to the workload, you also widen the gap, then that has increased the value proposition. But you need to be good at articulating the gap and why the new bigger gap is more valuable. If all I want to do is learn how to set up my first Facebook ads and you make it 6 weeks because you want to help me set up my first Facebook ads and set up an ongoing list growth ad on autopilot, but that's not what I want to set up ads for, that has not added any more value for me as the buyer. Other buyers it might have added more value for, but it hasn't added more value for me. So this is where value proposition for group programs and courses becomes specifically unique and nuanced, because it's one of the places where I see people add in more and more and more, trying to increase the perceived value, when actually, when you make it look like more work, you can actually decrease the perceived value. Yeah, sure, I do want to set up my first Facebook ad, but I don't have 6 weeks to give you and 17 hours of my time to watch all the bonuses. I just want to do it in 4 weeks as quickly as possible. Well, every bonus that you add into that course actually decreases my perception of the value of that course. So there is a fine line between more stuff giving more value and more stuff creating a bigger gap versus more stuff decreasing the value of that program. Now, the other big one that I want to quickly myth bust is that you can increase the value by explaining the value using value-based pricing. Now, value-based pricing, you've probably seen a lot before. It's definitely a common strategy used, particularly in fear-based marketing, particularly with some toxic marketing strategies. It's illegal in Australia in most cases, and it also, I find, is unethical, and it's a lie. It's made up. So what do I mean by value-based pricing? This is where you see someone that says you get access to 6 self-study modules on how to set up your Facebook ads. I'll use Facebook ads as an example for this podcast. And they are valued at $4,500. Plus you get access to our Facebook community where you can ask questions and get support, valued at $1,000. Plus, you get this bonus template. It's valued at $250. Plus, you get 4 live calls with me. That's valued at $4,000. Total value is $8,000 something. But you get it for $495. That is a 90% saving. Now, I've totally made up those numbers and my math is terrible. But this is a common strategy to try and increase value proposition. But it's the lazy way, it's the illegal way in Australia, and I feel it's the unethical way as well. Because in Australian consumer law, in order to say that something is valued at a certain amount, you need to have made it available for sale at that price and made a reasonable number of sales at that price. So if you've never offered access to your group for $1,000 and you've never sold a spot for $1,000, it is illegal under Australian consumer law to say that access to that group is valued at $1,000. And yet it is taught as a strategy. So notwithstanding the legal ramifications, a lot of people, especially in Australia, like whenever I ask this question of Australian mentors or people in my courses ask this question of other people, they'll say, oh yes, well, you've got to be very careful about the way that you use it, but you can use it in ethical ways. But actually that's not true. But also, notwithstanding the legal ramifications, there's actually a lot of negative side effects of using strategies and methodologies like this. Number one, it starts to become unbelievable, right? It starts to actually dissolve trust. Because if I see that model of pricing used for myself as an experienced marketer, number one, I'm like, well, that's lazy. Well, you're clearly struggling with your value proposition. Well, that's illegal if you're based in Australia. And so for me, because I know about this strategy and I know why they do it and I know why it's presented that way, it makes me less likely to buy from them. But actually as well, it does have the same effect, even if someone is not familiar with this type of strategy, or they know, oh, well, most people do that, that's fine. But if you overestimate the value of something in using value-based pricing, then it becomes unbelievable, right? It's like, that's not valued at that. Where did you pull that number from? And it creates this sense of, oh, hang on. And so it means that what you're creating is like a lean back from potential clients. And that lean back makes them question all of the things that you've shared on the sales page, all of the guarantees that you've made, all of the terms and conditions. If someone uses something like that, I will be far more likely to read their terms and conditions of their refund policy with a fine-tooth comb. Because if they're using that, they're probably using unwieldy, hoop-jumping refund policies as well, such as you can have a refund if you apply for one in the first 30 days, as long as you've done the work. And then you find out done the work means you have to have watched 40 hours worth of modules and done $1,600 worth of Facebook ad spend before you're entitled to a refund. And so I'm far more likely to be meticulous with checking their refund policy and the clarity of it. I also am less likely to trust testimonials because they're probably from their friends, because that's what people who use these strategies do. I can pick who they've learned from in a lot of cases as well. If they use the was then now pricing strategy, they're a Shremco fan, like I can spot it, yeah? And I know what comes with those strategies. Fear-based tactics, toxic marketing strategies, gaslighting, all the other stuff, pressure, using NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and psychological trickery in the sales process, right? They all go hand in hand with each other. And so not only is value-based pricing ineffective at creating a bigger perceived gap, but also it can erode trust. And that is not what we want to do in our sales process, especially not with a group program, course, or membership. So those two ones, I just wanted to dispel those straight away. You do not add value by adding more stuff in most cases, and you do not add value by simply overestimating the value of the components and then presenting it as a, well, if you paid for these individually, it would be $7,000, but I'm giving it to you for $700. Those sorts of things just do not work these days. So what does work to increase the value proposition of a group program? Number one, get tighter on your niche. Get far more clear on exactly who this is for, because when you're clear and specific on your niche, you're focusing on those people who value that gap naturally higher. So using the Facebook ads example, if your niche is anyone who wants to build a bigger audience, then some of them are not going to value Facebook ad strategy. But if your niche is people who are looking to grow their audience significantly, have tried Facebook ads before, but know that they need to learn how to use them more strategically, then those people have a far higher perception of value in the gap that you are bridging for them. So they automatically value it far higher. What that then means is that you're going to create more traction with that audience. You're going to be able to speak far more clearly to the challenges, lived experiences, and goals of that audience. And so the value proposition that you articulate will be clearer. It will be bigger because you're speaking to a very narrow niche. Think about trying to write a sales page for people anyone who wants to grow their audience, and your methodology is a Facebook ads course. Well, on your sales page, you're going to spend a lot of real estate convincing people Facebook ads is the right strategy. But the people who are most likely to value that thing don't need to be convinced that Facebook ads are the right strategy. So they're going to scroll through your page or click away because it looks like it's for beginners. It looks like it's for people who don't understand the value of Facebook ads. So the very people who would be most likely to value your program are turned off by the fact that you're trying to be broad. This is where very specific niching is so powerful. So number one, tighten your niche. Number two, get more tangible with your value proposition. So yes, feeling more confident is a great thing to be able to experience. But it is very difficult for audiences to ascribe a value to that confidence unless it has a tangible context and application. So let's say, and this is where niching comes into it as well, let's say you help people to be more confident on camera. There are some people who will deeply value confidence on camera because they want to start a video podcast. There are other people who being more confident on camera would be nice, but it's not a priority for them right now because they don't have video content in their strategy. Again, you get very specific with the niche. Now you can get more tangible with your value proposition. So saying, I'm going to make you more confident on camera, nice. Saying, I'm going to make you more confident on camera so that when you create your video content, it attracts more people, you are far more eloquent, and you create confidence from your audience that you are an expert in your field. Deeply valuable for the right niche. Deeply valuable. That's where tangibility comes into play with a value proposition. Don't just talk about feelings. Don't just talk about big picture experiences. Instead, talk about context. Talk about tangible examples. Talk about how it would be applied and why that creates the outcome that your audience is prioritizing. So if your ideal client's priority is getting more clients, you need to link confidence on camera with getting more clients. If your ideal client's number one priority is being seen as a leader and an expert, you need to link confidence on camera with being seen as a leader and an expert. And that's two different niches. And if you try and speak to both, you won't really connect with or resonate with either. So that's where, number one, get tight with the niche. Number two, get tangible, give it context. Number three is write down your value proposition. Now, this might sound like a no-brainer, but when I ask people for, okay, what's your value proposition for your program? A lot of people try and just tell me the tagline, or they just say, oh, I help people X, right? That's just like this one throwaway sentence. The value proposition of my courses and programs is a table that contains 3 columns, and for the Takeoff program, it's over 40 rows. So that's 120 pieces of content that articulates the value proposition of the program. 120 different ways for one tiny specific niche. So if you've never mapped out your value proposition before, I do recommend using the table format because it's so easy to do and it makes so much logical sense to me. So start with 3 columns in a table. Now, your free resource with this podcast episode is a value proposition template. So go and check out the show notes at tashcorbin.com/173. But even if you don't grab the template, if you just create a table that says before, after, why, then in each column you map it out. What is life like tangibly before doing your program? What are the lived experiences that tell people they have a problem? What are the lived experiences that make people want to achieve their goal? What is going on for this person that they're like, I need to solve this? What gets in the way? What problems are they experiencing? What is life like before doing your program? The second column is after. What is it? What is that experience like afterwards? So if before they stumble over their words on camera and they say lots of ums and ahs and they don't come across as confident, in after, you speak confidently and eloquently, and when people hear you speak, you come across as a leader and an expert. See that before and after, we've got contrast. We're articulating the gap. The third column is the most important. Why is that gap, that change, critical to your ideal client? So before, you're clunky on camera. After, you come across as an eloquent expert, so you can attract more clients and convert them faster because they trust you and they see you as an expert. See how we're linking the transformation with the value. Value proposition is the gap between before and after, and the value of that gap through the eyes of your client. So this is literally answering that question. What is life like before? What is life like after? Why is it critical to your ideal client that they achieve that transformation? And then go to town on how many rows you want to put on this. So it might also be before, you avoid getting on camera because you don't feel confident. Afterwards, you're hungry to create and record lots and lots of video content. So you can reach larger audiences, nurture stronger relationships, and get more sales. See how, before, after, why? The why column is so critical. Why would they want this? Why would they want that transformation? So just like with the sleep example that I gave, before you're sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night and not well, after, you get a solid 8 hours and it's quality sleep, so you can make better decisions and have more energy during the day. But see how that's unniched? That's anyone who gets more sleep. If we were to niche it to business owners, for example, well, then we could start talking about the tangible examples. Before, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you get brain fog and you're reaching for the caffeine. After, you're so well rested at night that you are able to do a full work day without relying on sugar, caffeine, and stimulants. So you can build your business without creating adrenal fatigue and burnout. Now, see how much more valuable that is to me as a business owner than just 5 hours a night to 8 hours a night so that you've got, you're more rested and you've got more energy. More energy is great, but unless you articulate how that relates to my lived experience, I'm not going to see as much value in it. Okay, so that's number 3, map out your value proposition. And a quick reminder, go and grab the template at tashcorbin.com/173. There's some instructions with that and some examples as well. Number 4, get helpful feedback. Now, this is an important one because a lot of people do a lot of crowdsourcing when it comes to understanding why their course might be valuable or what needs to be included or what should I say about this. I've even seen people post on their social media, like, what would a sales page of a XYZ course need to say to convince you to buy it? Now, good on you for trying by asking that question, but realistically, your audience don't actually know what you need to say to them. Because if they already knew the answer to that question, they would already know that buying a course of that nature was valuable to them, and they probably would have already bought one. And if you ask your students who have completed the program, what could the sales page have said to make this an easier decision for you, then they're going to speak through the lens of having completed the program. And we get a little rose-colored glasses when it comes to reflecting on what state we were in before we purchased something. Or we might overstate some of the pain points that we experienced in the past because we can see now the big gap between where we were and where we are now. We feel so much better now that we almost overstate the pain before. So getting information from your audience can be helpful or it can be unhelpful. So when I say get helpful feedback, I want you to focus on the things that actually are meaningful and inform your value proposition. So asking a question like, what do I need to tell you for you to see it as valuable, is moot. It's pointless. Because the people who can answer that question don't have the information that they need to answer that question. And the people who have what they need to answer that question give the least helpful answers to that question. So instead, get helpful feedback by offering it, by promoting it. Post the offer and see what questions people ask. Run a webinar and pitch your course and see what resistance points people have. When you first launch a group program or a course, or if you're relaunching, do sales conversations with people so that you can deeply understand what they need to know before they can commit, what resistance they have, what objections they have. Get helpful feedback by doing meaningful market research. So being specific to your niche, asking the internet at large for market research is not helpful. Asking people specifically in your niche to help you with market research is helpful. So get helpful feedback, do helpful market research. Ask questions of your audience, but make sure you're specific to the niche for the program, and make sure that you're not actually trying to just outsource the marketing work to them, and you're asking them questions that they are equipped to answer. So for example, for those people who are getting frustrated with their Facebook ads, what is most frustrating for you, and what do you wish someone could just do for you? That's helpful. For those people who are struggling to get a good night's sleep, but know that they need to keep trying, why do you keep trying? That's understanding motivation, the value of the gap. So you can see there are good questions to ask and there are not so great questions to ask. The way to work out how to ask good questions is, one, get help with putting those questions together, or two, ask them. Ask lots of questions. Practice your pitch. Have lots of conversations. The more that you talk to people in your niche about these problems, about the gap, about their motivations, the more insight you'll get, and the more you will understand how to ask the question in such a way that you get meaningful and helpful feedback. Number 5, build your belief. For a lot of people, the reason why people don't value or see the value of their course or program is because the seller is timid. The seller undersells it. The seller doesn't want to make any false promises, so they don't talk about any kind of transformation whatsoever. The seller is so afraid of being a spammy marketer that they don't market it at all. And it's very hard for us to believe in your program if you don't believe in it. So you need to collect evidence that this program will facilitate transformation. You need to build your belief that this program is the best way for people to get from where they are to where they want to be if they fit this niche. You need to build your belief that if people follow the step-by-step process outlined in your program, they will get the outcome that you promise on the sales page. If you don't believe it, whether you say it or not in your copy, we won't believe it. But for a lot of women in particular, a lot of people from marginalized communities, a lot of people who have traditionally not had a voice or been told to be quiet, we are particularly challenged when it comes to speaking up about the value of things. We're particularly challenged when it comes to saying, this is powerful, this is effective, and this is why. We really struggle with talking ourselves up and talking our programs up. So you need to build your belief and practice speaking powerfully about the value proposition of your course or program. All right, lovely peeps. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. Juicy one, right? And don't forget to go and grab your value proposition template and guide over at tashcorbin.com/173. We'll make sure that the link is in the show notes for you. Until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Big love from me and bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.